Hello, everyone. This is Your Yes is Needed podcast. And tonight I have a guest who's actually going to interview me questions because I actually asked Wendy, who is a teammate of mine on Team Rise, our bodybuilding team. And Wendy Hyatt is a two-time back-to-back world champ in Masters Bikini. So, and I am a back-to-back last place champ. So, true story. And I hang out with the champions, so that's great. So, one of the things I have known Wendy for I think about a year now. But we've gotten closer the last 6 months when we went to the New York show. And true story, I asked God, I was like, look, if you want me to have this mindset, you gotta surround me with some other people that got some mindset, like at least something similar. Like you gotta hook me up, man. And so it just so happened the New York show that we did together, there was supposed to be a lot more people that was supposed to compete, and then it just narrowed down to us. In fact, I was not even supposed to compete. 3 weeks prior to that, if you guys read my book, I said, nah, I ain't doing this. I was like, I'm done. And then within the 2 week mark, I was like, all right, I'm in. And I had to put in a lot of work to naturally get ready for stage, which ended up being my ticket to compete at Worlds. So that was pretty dope. And so one of the things that sorry, I pushed a button on accident. So one of the things that I had asked Wendy, because she just finished reading the book, I said, hey, can you ask me questions? Like, can you ask me hard questions? Because she knows me as the athlete behind closed doors, and she has seen me as a coach. And I sometimes can be almost two different people, how I talk to people and how I talk to myself. And sometimes that's hard because there are a lot of days where I need to be really hard on myself, not in a negative way, but I need to push myself when I don't feel like doing something. And then how I talk to someone and just give them encouraging words, but it wouldn't be things I would tell myself because I'm a lot harder on myself. And I had this conversation with her and I said, it's hard because I have this phrase that I always say, sometimes you need to be Goggins and then sometimes you need to be Oprah. But there's only one person that knows how that you need to talk to yourself, and that's you. Like, that's why I don't really get my answers off the internet. Because there's so many answers on the internet. Like you can really pick whatever answer you want, and you're right. But which one do you need to know in order to either transform, transition, transpire, to get to the next level? So that's why I asked her, hey, do you want to come on the show and ask me hard questions? And so she's a little nervous, y'all. But she's going to do fine. So go ahead, Wendy. Go ahead with your first questions. First of all, how did you like the book?
I really loved it. So when you first asked me if I could ask you hard questions, I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then I was like, wait a second. Am I coming up with the questions or are you coming up with the questions that I'm just asking you? Because there's a difference. So, but yeah, I mean, like, I love this part. I love this aspect about you because you have an idea and you go with it. And the New York show, actually the show that we had just done in the beginning of this month was just another example of like, hey, I don't know all the details. We don't need to know all the details. Let's just see what happens.
We just competed at the Arnold's about 3 weeks ago in Ohio, and we had no clue what to expect. We had to learn a whole new different posing. We had to learn, everything was new. And I was like, yo, I'm down if you down. And I was like, okay. And so we went there, still clueless. We got lost looking for certain things in 26 degrees weather at peak week. That was fun. But it's like we were okay with it because we knew walking into it that we were expecting things just to, enter into the land of discovery. And
Yeah.
so we were okay with like, all right, yeah, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I think that's like having that mindset was like almost like already okay on top of everything else that we had to do. So yes, I did ask you to make up your own questions because I told you a long time ago before you even knew me. I said, Wendy, bro, like I was a douchebag, bro. You don't even understand. She's like, like you're so sweet. I was like, Wendy, you don't know. So now you text me after you read the book. You were like, wow, it's so funny how we met. Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah.
hilarious how we met. It was based on like, okay, because I did this competition and then all of a sudden I was asked to do a competition and I didn't know it was bodybuilding, but because of the circumstance and situation, I said yes to it.
And if it weren't for bodybuilding, our paths would not have crossed.
Oh no, not even close.
But yeah. So I think that's sort of where I wanted to start when I first met you. So it's like meeting you in bodybuilding prep is like meeting someone for the first time on Halloween, because it's not their normal state, and you're like, oh, this is my first impression of this person. So so I like the first 6 months of our friendship, I probably spent more time, the majority of the time that we spent together was either in a bikini and heels or rarely in the gym. So like I was used to seeing you like pretty much naked or sweating. So
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. that's how our friendship got started. So I know that at the beginning of a competition prep, like nobody really is super comfortable with their bodies. And even for me, and I knew that it being girly was not like a normal thing for you either. So, but for me, knowing where I do not like the first day of posing class because you're uncomfortable in your own skin and you're wearing like micro cloth and you're in these uncomfortable shoes and learning how to walk. So if it was uncomfortable for me, I was sitting there and I was just thinking, like, you had listed a bunch of different things that had changed in your life. Like, what was that like to stand there in class? Like, knowing that you have just changed your hair. Apparently you had never had your hair cut before by anyone else. You cut your own hair. The color had changed. You found a bikini that you
on Target.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't know there was such thing as a posing suit.
Yeah. It like you've changed a lot of things on the external side. How did you do that? Like,
that's a great question, because so the working part, the dieting, that was like cool to me. I was like, oh, I like this. Like, I could do this. This is easy. But once it came down to like when the first posing class got, posted, and I was like, I sat there at the stairs of my camp, and I saved it in my stories on my Instagram. It's one of my prep ones that I saved. And I had a long conversation through my stories, and I said, I'm going to be honest, guys. I don't want to do this. And the more honest as I was, and because like I've had this conversation about hidden anxieties. And so I'm able to narrow down my hidden anxieties because it's something that I taught myself when I was in the Navy. And so I knew that one of my hidden anxieties was getting ready to do posing class. And I just was so transparent about my feelings. And I was like, all right, guys, I ain't gonna lie. I don't want to do this, but I have to be honest. if I keep up with this I don't want to attitude, I'm gonna hate it even more. And so I told myself, you either gonna like it or you're gonna be miserable. And so I thought about being miserable. I was like, well, it's only 6 weeks. But then I was like, bro, just rip that Band-Aid off. So I asked for help. And I think that's a lot of things what people avoid. So I knew I wasn't going to like it. I knew, so I accepted that. So I knew I had to change my attitude. So I assigned 3 people. I said, listen, you guys have permission to rip off my Band-Aids. I will say ungodly things about you, but I will repent later. So if you can just rip off my Band-Aids, I will appreciate you. And so what happened was they came with a bag of makeup and they're just in the living room, like, go put your suit on. I was like, ooh. And then we had like, this is how training night out got invented, because I knew, like, if I don't do this now, I'm going to be miserable. So I just put myself out there, but I gave people permission to rip off my Band-Aids because I knew I was not going to rip off my band. I knew it. I just knew if I could hang on to this Band-Aid, I will. So, but I know me very well. And so what I did was I gave permission for people to rip it off, and it worked. Because, oh, good God, and that's why I can tell when people have their Band-Aids on. I'm like, it's going to come off one way or another. Either I'm going to rip it off or you're going to rip it off, but someone has to rip it off. Because, so that's how it started. I asked folks to rip it off for me.
Yeah. So you brought up 2 important distinctions from, I mean, this isn't about being success, like the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people. However, that because I'm sitting with you and having this discussion, like I'm going to tap into that because I see you as a highly successful person. Like I posted today, I commented on one of your posts today. I'm like, you piss me off to the point that it motivates me. Like
I read that.
I don't know if you noticed. I'm like, I'll just tell this to you now because it's like very few people, I know you know this, but like very few people, I mean, a lot of people talk about what they want to do. Like, I have a book in me. Like, I always want to write a book. And so when you had said that you're writing your book, I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll see you next year or whatever. And then like you said it while we were in prep, and I was just like, okay, whatever. And then before the show, we were just hanging out in the hotel and you're like, oh, my book came in. I'm like, what? I'm like, okay, of course it did. Of course it did. Because you're the type of person who doesn't let all the minutia of getting something done get in your way. You're just, and I love that about you. Like the whole, like, let's get over being perfect, because it's never achievable. Like done.
Well, yes and no. So I didn't think my book was going to finish that fast either. So I had finished writing it, and I had asked a friend who's a journalist, so like, hey, can you read it and see if the, like, you know, the flow of things is good, and you can correct whatever you want and blah blah blah. And then I was expecting that to take a few months, because to me there was no rush in launching a book, because I had only expected about 5 people to buy it, or 6 people to buy it, aka my team. So that's who I wrote it for. And then when it was done, I was like, oh, okay, wow. But I didn't reread it again. And then, so I've read my own book about 10 times already. And every time I write, every time I read it again, I find more mistakes. And I'm like, oh, so but that's not the part that I care about. The mistakes is not what I care about. Like, it's easy to correct on the website and just reload it again. It's the message that's more important to me. So to you, it's like, you have to ask yourself, well, what's more important to me? Everything that I do, the podcast, the books, the the camp, the t-shirts and everything, it will always be about the message. The message is the most important thing that drives me. So even though I get up at 4 a.m. and it's already 9:30 here, which I'm usually in bed, to me, the message is the energy that gets me up and going and able to do all things. Because when I was working all these massive hours, I was always physically tired. Am I physically tired? Yes. But am I wiped to the point where I feel like I'm just so out of it? No. That to me is very, very, very strange, because I remember when I used to work 7 days a week and I used to be so exhausted, and I do almost 3 times more now. And yet I find myself wanting to do more. And I realize, because I'm in the year of, are you willing? Are you willing to do more? And there's not one person that's in back of my head that I'm in competition with. Good God, there's no way. I'm in competition with no one. Like, I'm very driven by the message. So what keeps me up, what keeps me writing, what keeps me creative, what keeps me ordering, what keeps me everything is the message. So a lot of people were, they ask a lot of questions. I'm like, well, what's your why? And so when someone changes their why all the time, I'm like, bro, you don't have a why, dog. You want a why, but you don't have a why. Your why does not change. Maybe it matures and it grows as you're in it, but there's no way that it changes so much the way it does with people that are so desperate to find purpose.
Mhm.
So that's what
Yeah.
keeps me going.
That's awesome. I had a real fascination with your story, with like the journey of your bodybuilding stage, where yeah, your first show you came in last and it hurts a little bit. Your second show came in last again and I was like, oh. And third show last, we're like, oh. You kept going. There was the New York show in September. It came in last, but hey, you got an invitation to the world stage because you showed up. And then October came. and, and again, you placed last. And it was just like, that was your breaking point where you just had this meltdown. And I was just like, how it almost got to the point where I was like, oh, it hurts to watch, because it's just like, we don't do it for the trophy. We don't do it for the external reward, but it's hard to ignore that sometimes because it's.
Well, that's why we compete, because we want to see where we're at. Right. And so, and though competing will always be for me, we still compete with others to see, where do we place at? Mm-hmm. And so, the October show, I was pretty much all set. I was done. I was like, I'm done with this.
So before then, though, I don't know, October was 7-6, your fifth show. Mm-hmm. So at that point, it's just like, okay, you've come in last 5 times. And I don't think I know anyone else who has done that. And to be able to get up and just keep grinding and show up again, like how, like a lot of people would have said, maybe this is not your sport, or, are you done yet? Or something like that. But it's like, there's a little bit of like, sometimes I feel embarrassed, and I know it's just like, well, if she keeps going, then it's like, why am I embarrassed? There's nothing.
Yeah, and I have such a huge disadvantage when I have 3-size baseballs growing inside my stomach. And then when you're depleting and trying to get abs, you're like, oh, there goes your tumor that's sticking out. So I asked myself, like, out of all the sports, why am I trying to get the one that my stomach won't ever get flat because something is sticking out? But it's I've asked myself that same question, Wendy. It's hard. It's super hard because um you really have to sit down and evaluate every intention that you're doing. And the sport is not cheap. Like there's an average of $500 to $700 each show.
Mhm.
So you're investing $500 to $700 just to be looked at on stage for what, 3.5 seconds, just to hurry up and get to the last place of the line. And you still have to stand on stage smiling like, hey, just in case you miss a spot, I'm still here at the end. And so, and then you do that 5 more times. So it felt like it was hard. It was very, very hard. And then you just have to get to you have to always go back to the intention, and the intention will always be about the message. So it cracks. That's why I posted on my Instagram today, like, if I'm not living it, don't believe me. If I'm still going and I'm telling you to go, then so hey, but no one can never look in my face and say, Des, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like,
Mm.
it's hard
Yeah.
it's hard to say that to me.
Right, right. And there are plenty of people who during prep can say, oh, I decided to wait this season out, my body isn't ready. And normally I would have just been like, okay, your head's not in the game, stuff comes up, it happens. But there's something that's different when you're in the room and someone says that. I'm just like, oh. And I looked because I was like, she didn't hear that. Does he earmuffs? You didn't hear that. But it's like, what do you think? Do you think that is like a wake-up call to some people? It's just like, sometimes I'm like, do you see who's in the room? Did you just say that? Do you know who? Do you know where you are?
I get, honestly, I get phone calls, like I get stuff like that all the time. I get doubt all the time. It's because there's for 3 reasons. Some people, they're very rare, are looking for encouragement. That's the very rare. The majority are trying to figure out how I figure it out, but they're not asking me the right questions.
Mhm.
And so when I give them an answer, I've been laughed at from my answers, or they just don't like my answer. And I'm like, well, okay, well then go find someone else. And so, or the other one is like, if they're able to recruit me to their level of, no, this can't happen. This is probably not going to be able to be possible. And I'm not I'm just the wrong one. And so it doesn't phase me no more. In the beginning, it used to phase me, but after so much, it just becomes like you just collect leather skin.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
and I think that personally, I think that's terrible, to where the fact that I've heard it so much in only 2 years, to where it just almost bounces off now.
mhm. But you have disproved it so many times, and that's from where you are now to where you were last year was even such a huge difference. And then I know I can feel that from here until like a year from now, it's going to be like exponential growth, just because of your daily habits, the habits that you've instilled way before like 2 years ago. That's when it happened. And now it's just catching up. So I know it feels a little bit late to ask you now, but as you were growing and shifting your mindset and shifting your self-awareness, your triggers and things, like, what was the hardest thing about changing at first? Was it changing your social circle, or losing your old self, or like stepping out into the unknown? I know that's not scary for you anymore because you live it, but what do you think was the most
the
hard?
Scariest is to me, the most scariest and the most sensitive part of your life is is the part where you have to decide, is walking away from what you're used to going to welcome a new life. And that's the hardest part, because it's the most sensitive part, because you literally don't want to disappoint no one. You really want to be around people that you assume have your back and love you genuinely and want to support you. You really, with all your heart, you really want to believe that. And so you really believe one way, like your belief system is locked in this way. And then there's a point in your life where you're just like, this ain't it. There's something that's not it. And so when your soul's looking for it, and there's this big shift that happens in your life, you just hope with all your heart and soul that this next phase of your life is it, even if you do it alone. And so what happens is that is the most sensitive part of your life, because that's literally your make it or your break it point. Because if you're looking for acceptance, you're going to go backwards to be accepted by the people which you know you're supposed to walk away from. If you're looking for approval, then you're always going to look for approval no matter what phase you're on. And if you're always looking for love and you don't even love yourself, you will welcome anything that likes you. And so what happens is, if you don't believe with your whole heart and soul that this next phase, that you're going to be okay, even if you don't even know what it looks like, because the faith that you lean on says, all right, you have to have my back, no matter, like, this is it, then you have to have my back. All comes down to pure intentions. You have to study your intentions so much that you have to start asking yourself all the time, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? What's the next step? And you have to be okay with opening that door. So I talk about in the book, I love being triggered because I know the outcome of me physically. And so when I purposely leave a whole bar at my house, and I haven't drank it for 2 years. And so what I did was, every time I was triggered, I hurried up and opened that book. Why am I triggered? I hurried up and opened that door. A lot of people just, no. I'm gonna walk away, or I'm gonna dump it out, because they don't want to. You just lost an opportunity to face something that's going to come up again.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was, I hurried up and opened that door, and I was like, ooh, what's all this? And I hurried up and faced it. And then once I started picking up that habit, it became easier. I'm like, oh, well, this is embarrassing. And the more, you're going to be embarrassed, you're going to be shy, you're going to be shocked, you're going to be uncomfortable, you're going to be all those good things, but you're fine. You're going to live.
Yeah.
But so then once you're triggered again, I hurry up and open the door. Why? Why am I triggered? And I became almost obsessed with triggers, to where I almost look for it. Who can trigger me? And why am I triggered?
Yeah.
But no one taught me that. It's just, I just started picking up that habit right away.
That's awesome. I just learned about it when I met, around the time that I met you, a little before that. I was just like, ooh, I don't like to be triggered. But then I just, like, once I was led through a triggering session and worked through it and came out the other side okay, I was alive, I was like, oh wow, that was amazing. Let's do it again.
Yeah, I remember that. Your first trigger, I was like, okay, we have to slowly, surely, and then all of a sudden, but a lot of times, like, you have to chase your triggers. And a lot of people run away from their triggers, or they're offended.
Yeah.
So, I mean, pick one. You want to live limitless, or do you want to live limited?
Yeah.
There's only you can answer that.
And either way, you're saying yes to one of those choices, right?
You might as well pick one that's going to take you to a limitless mindset.
Yeah, I love it. So my last question, which is not as hard. I really wanted to give you some hard questions, but like, for someone who is looking to change their situation, what's your best advice to them?
Ooh, Wendy, that's a good one. I would honestly say let your pride hurt. And when I knew when I had lost it the first time, and it could, like, when I lost it the first time in April of 2018, and I went on emergency leave to Costa Rica, which I talked about in the book, I knew flying back, I meditated on it. I said, if I don't call myself out, I'm going to be stuck again. And so the thing was, no one knew about this except for like maybe 2 or 3 people. And I knew my work was not going to know about it because the only people that knew it was probably like one coworker and then the managers. But if I wanted to keep it to myself and never talk about it, my coworkers would have respected that. And so, but I knew deep down, like, man, if you don't take advantage of this opportunity and call yourself out, you're never going to find it. So I wrote a Facebook page. I wrote a Facebook status and I called myself out in front of everybody. And then after that, I was kind of shocked by the response, like, oh yeah, me too. And I shared it with you guys on Zoom. I was so pissed. I was like, wait, so why didn't you guys share this stuff before? Like, you mean to tell me that, like, you too, but then I feel so alone in this. Like, I felt like you guys are, I was a bit pissed. So hence why my transparency on social media now is because I never want anyone to feel alone because of that. And so you have to call yourself out. But I'm not gonna lie, man. In the beginning, it'll suck. However, calling yourself out is the most powerful thing you can have. I mean, who's gonna talk shit to you? Like, can you imagine someone saying, like, hey, I heard you went to a psych ward? Like, yeah, I wrote about it in my own book. And I talk about it all the time on my social media. Like, you don't make sense. Like, to me, calling myself out is so powerful. Like, I don't see a cloud over people holding stuff over my head saying, hey, remember you did this? Yeah, I call myself out all the time. So I learned change requires giving up your pride and your ego. So you might as well start there.
So good.
Let it hurt. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it.
But
thank you so much
thank you for coming on the podcast with me. You're actually my first guest on my podcast.
Oh, I'm so honored. I knew this was a fantastic opportunity and I couldn't say no to it. So thank you. I'm so honored to be in your space and doing hard stuff with you because it's hard. But like
we always say hard stuff is hard.
Yeah, but it's so much better when you can do it with other people. And you've taught me to really just continue sharing because somebody else's story is gonna,
I promise you, someone's always watching, whether they ever admit it or not, if they ever acknowledge it or whatever, someone is always watching. So
we're never alone.
Nope. So, but thank you again for coming on the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Wendy Hyatt is her name, and her Instagram is, what is your Instagram?
Wendy Hyatt Wellness.
Yes. And so she has good content. She's very transparent about where she came from, how she grew, and you guys would definitely enjoy her journey as well. Good night, everyone.
Good night.